vacation, so I'm going to be doing our first one in person, and welcome. It's nice to see everybody's face once and finally. I'm glad to have you here. So welcome to our July 13th meeting of the Issaquah Environmental Board. So due to our hybrid format of tonight's meeting, I'm going to provide a few guidelines, and Stacy's going to correct me when I make mistakes. So we're going to have participants attending in person and then also some online via our remote system here. So we need to speak clearly, pause frequently, state your name each time before you speak. We don't have microphones, nothing to mute, but the folks on the other side need to mute their microphones if they're not speaking, please. For those of you on the remote side, if you're having technical issues, try joining the meeting using a different device, smartphone or tablet, or use the call-in information in the meeting invite to call into the meeting. Commissioners, when you have the desire to speak, make a question or comment, rather than type it in like we have, we've decided just to tip our little sign up like that, and then I'll call on you as we go around the room there. At the end of each topic, we'll summarize the agreement around recommendations. Tonight we have 4 excused absences, Jamie being one. Stacey, who are our other?
Matangi, Rishi, and Laura.
And do we need any alternates to be serving as regular members?
Yes, Janet and Tom.
I don't believe we're going to be voting on anything tonight. And Stacey, do you want to do orientation before roll call?
Great. Yeah, just a quick orientation to the room since it's new to all of us. Bathrooms are in the back. Kitchen, if you need a water refill, is over to my left. Emergency exit are out these 2 back doors. And then if anyone is joining on their computer, just let me know so we can make sure to disconnect your audio so we don't get an audio feed. Noted that no public internet, that's something maybe we can look into. So if you do have other comments about the room, the setup, anything else that you have needs for during the meeting, just let me know and we'll make a note to accommodate that at the next meeting.
Do we need to do attendance?
Sure.
For the record.
Let's do it. Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Tom Anderson.
Here.
Nancy Davidson.
Here.
Cameron Fisher.
Yeah.
Dan Hintz.
Here.
Ashwin Manaharan.
Here.
Don McWilliams.
Here.
Ann Newcomb.
Here.
And Janet Wall.
Here.
Do we have any public comments at this time?
I did not see any, or I did not receive any comments in writing ahead of the meeting. I do not see any members of the public online, and we have no members of the public in the room.
If somebody steps in either online, please let me know, and then we'll go through that process. Otherwise, next up is approval of our minutes. So we're approving the minutes from the May 11th and the June 8th meetings. Are there any comments on the minutes that would like to be noted? Seeing none, minutes are approved. Seeing no public comments tonight, we'll move right in. We only have one topic tonight, and it's probably good because we're in a new format, so plenty of time. So Alan and Gary are here to talk to us tonight about the Stormwater and Wastewater Master Plan. All yours.
So if you give me back control? Or?
Yes, you should have the presenter.
I'm sorry?
You should have the presenter control back.
Oh, okay. Okay, there we go. Now, how do I? Share. Yep. Which one do I share? Okay. All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Alan Quinn. I'm a senior stormwater engineer for the city of Issaquah, and I'll be presenting the storm and source water master plan final adoption. And I have Gary Shimmick, he'll be here as needed, as support, moral support. He's the utilities engineering manager. And then I have the OTAC team, the consultant firm that we hired to help us develop the plan. And the team consists of Trista Lusky and Sheila Jane. And Trista's really, she did a great job really spearheading this whole effort. Sheila is really did her grunt work. She's an engineer and did all the analysis and all the technical work. So welcome those two. And I guess I just want to start off by saying that I think last time we met here was about a year ago, last spring, and that was the first meeting. I think that was the very inaugural environmental board meeting. And so here we are again.
Thank you, Alan. Can I pause you for a second?
Sure.
Would you like questions, comments as we go, or wait till the end?
You can, whatever you prefer.
I see Nancy's got a question or comment.
So the agenda topic is stormwater and wastewater master plans. Are you going to present wastewater as well?
No, this is just the storm and surface water master plan.
So will the wastewater plan be coming back at a different time?
I'm not sure.
Yes, they'll be coming back at the third quarter or fourth quarter, yes.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Sorry for the confusion.
Sure. Okay, so moving on here. All right, so the purpose of this meeting, or this presentation, is really to just explain where we're at. It's really a summary of all the work that's been done, quick summary and status, and what we need to do to complete this plan and get a final adoption at the end of the year. We also want to present the final, the product of all the effort that the culmination of all the work over the last several years. We initiated this whole process back in late 2019, really, and then COVID hit, so that sort of delayed things a bit. But here we are. So that's going to really consist of the final SMOs, or stormwater management options, which is another term that we use would be projects, actual CIP projects that we can implement, put into our CIP program, and then within like a 20-year time horizon. So, and a quick agenda summary. So I'm going to briefly discuss what's going to be in the final draft plan, schedule, the SMAP requirement. We'll get to that a little bit later. Prioritization process recap, and SMO screening for final CIP. So how we actually got to these final 10 projects. The SMO metrics we use to prioritize these projects, and the final list of 10 projects. And then any questions?
Alan,
Okay. Yes.
when you have acronyms, can you define them for us?
Yes, I will do that, exactly. Thank you. So basically what we need to do is, so this plan, we're going to submit, there's two courses of action. One is it satisfies the requirement in our NPDES, which is our National Pollution Discharge Elimination System Phase 2 permit. And that's a permit that allows us to basically it's a discharge permit, so we can actually discharge stormwater to waters of the U.S. Part of that permit requires that we develop an SMAP, or Stormwater Management Action Plan. And so this is going to satisfy part of that requirement, but it's also to help assist with developing our CIP list as part of our stormwater management plan that we currently have. And we're going to sort of update that plan with these new projects. So it really is going to consist of, and this plan, when it's completed, it's in a draft form now, will be submitted to Ecology for their review. They've been reviewing different parts of this plan all along the last couple of years, and then they're going to get the final plan to review. And then concurrently, we're going to be getting it reviewed through internal staff, and then get adopted by the council at the end of the year, November timeframe. The plan consists of the existing conditions assessment, which is I think we discussed that at the last meeting. We went through with that, what all was that entailed. That was a huge amount of work to really look at what the existing basins are like in terms of water quality, habitat, and flooding issues. It had a lot of stakeholder input for identifying issues that we have in the various basins in the city. And so that really is all packaged in that section. The SMO, or Stormwater Management Options List and metrics, that will be in there. That will be all the problems, or all the identified problems, and then the solutions to solve those problems. Stakeholder engagement, there's a section on how we got to this point in terms of having everyone involved in the process. So that includes the public, agencies, internal staff, various committees, boards, and city council. So that's been huge over the last couple of years. And then the college needs to have that in there as well, so they can see that we've actually followed the public process to really come up with, these projects. The final priority SMO list, the schedule, and then budget needs, adaptive management, and then base and prioritization and SMAP. So keep moving along here. So so once again, SMAP, that's just another, it's just this thought process that we have to go through, and it's something that is part of the NPDES permit that ecology requires all cities to develop and within a certain time frame. So plan completion schedule. So as you can see there, there's really 4 touch points with various committees and boards. First one is, of course, the environmental board tonight. Then we're going to quickly turn around and present to the Parks Board and the end of the month. In early August, Planning, Development, and Environmental Committee. And then in November will be the City Council adoption. So I also have a timeline for this will involve SEPA, because we are looking at, this could have potential changes to, land use, and all kinds of things could evolve from this. So we do have to go through a SEPA review process. So we'll initiate that sometime in August once we have the final draft plan completed and then out for review. Then it would be ecology. That's their review schedule in there. Give them time to look at the final product and provide any comments. And then internal city staff. So we've been already working with the various departments. Parks Department has been involved in this. Operations. So we've involved several departments already, and planning development, they're really looking at it. And we want to try to get all those comments incorporated and then finalize it, address all the comments, finalize, and get it for the City Council in November. SMO and CIP prioritization process. I'm going to let OTAC and Trista take over this one. I think you get something for her to talk about. Really did a great job.
Thanks, Alan. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. I'm Trista Kobleski from OTAC. Thanks for that nice introduction earlier, Alan. We've been really pleased to be working on this for the past, I think we actually started in 2018. So we've been working on this for quite a while, and it's a pretty ambitious plan. And we're happy that it's coming to the finish line. So we wanted to just run through a little bit about how we took over 300 issues that we collected during that initial phase when we were doing the baseline assessments of each basin, and winnowed it down step by step until we have reached a capital improvement program of 10 projects. And I'm just going to go over this pretty quickly. And as far as I'm concerned, if you have questions during this slide, it's fine. I don't know that I'll be able to see you, so someone else will have to prompt me. But we collected more than 300 issues, water quality issues, flooding issues, erosion and sedimentation in streams, and maintenance issues. And we collected them from a variety of sources. A lot came from city staff. Some came from the public when we went to the public and asked them to put dots on a map and tell us where they had concerns. Other public reports of issues that came in independently of that, and other agencies, your neighbors, and other agency stakeholders all contributed to that list. And then the city itself initiated a process with its internal stakeholders and a few invited stakeholders to select the top issues from that quite large set. And they came up with 41 issues. And those were spread throughout the city. In fact, it was important that we had issues represented in all of the basins. And it was also important that there were issues representing all the different types of issues that we had collected. I neglected to mention, I'm sorry, that habitat issues, most of which are culvert or fish passage barriers, were also included in that initial set. So once we had the top 41 issues representing, again, a variety of issue types and spread throughout the city, from that, we selected 23 to develop conceptual solutions for, some real high-level solutions at that point, and we are calling those stormwater management options, SMOs, as Alan mentioned before. This terminology comes from the ecology grant that is funding part of this work, but not all of it. We selected those 23. We had some similar criteria. We wanted to make sure there was a solution for in that representative set for at least pardon me, one in at least every basin, at least one in every basin. And again, we wanted the set of solutions to represent a variety of problems or issues. And we importantly wanted to focus on what are known as retrofits. And that is providing new water quality or new flow control service to an area that doesn't have water quality or doesn't have flow control, because it was developed prior to regulations requiring that. And one reason we wanted to focus on that is that is the key requirement of that SMAP requirement in your permit, and is also a key requirement of the ecology grant that's funding part of this work. So it was really important that we ensure that there was a number of those retrofits in that set. After we had that set of 23, we applied some metrics to them. And these metrics had been approved by ecology under the grant. And we can actually look at what the metrics were in the next slide. I actually think Gary and Alan talked to you about them before. When we were developing the list of metrics, they reviewed what we were going to use. I can just go over that list again. We did end up using essentially the same things we talked about, or you talked about with Gary and Alan at that time. And the purpose of the metrics was to create a ranking of those solutions. And then from that ranked list, we chose 10 to develop a little further into the capital improvement program. And just to set your mind at ease, all the known issues, the entire set of SMOs, whether or not they floated to the top or not, are all going to be represented in the plan. So there'll be lists of everything in the plan. And the capital improvement projects, the 10 that floated to the top, will just be developed further than the rest, and we'll have better cost information and more of an idea of when those solutions will be implemented. But your plan has developed so much information that there will be a backlog of things that you can work on for years to come with the information that we developed in this plan. So even though 10 floated to the top, nothing's really been lost, and there's a wealth of information that you can use to continue solving problems over the next several years. That was really long, so sorry, I was pretty verbose there. I'll stop now.
No, it's great, Elizabeth, thank you. Yeah, I think it's important to know that really this plan, although it will be adopted by council, it's a living document, and it can, it will evolve, and every 2 years we go through a budget process of developing CIPs, and when we develop that capital improvement program, we'll pull projects from the 10 and incorporate it into the CIP. But it doesn't mean that, as things change and other issues come up, we could adjust it, and there might be a process where we, revise it at some point in the future. So I think it's important to know that we want to keep all those solutions in there, but that we, recognize we have to really narrow down to the select few that we can really drill down and come up with detailed cost estimates and implementation and schedules for them. So, all right, moving on here. So just go through these again. These SMOs, stormwater management option metrics and prioritization. So once again, Gary and I, the last time we met a year ago or plus, we went through these. I think we did ask for feedback, and I think generally speaking, everyone was okay with these metrics in terms of how to assign numerical value for each of these, and as a way to really prioritize projects And so just real quickly, we looked at the, how well does it actually solve the problem in terms of water quality, flooding and habitat, and how, and a direct benefit to Lake Sammamish. We thought that was important.
Yeah, Ellen, just on that one, just to remember, I think that was actually added after our conversation, the benefit to Sammamish, and that's one that, from this discussion, ended up adding to the list.
Correct.
So just,
That's right.
so remind everybody of that one.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then land ownership, that we always got to consider that in any project. Do we own, do we have, you know, the title to the, or is it right away, or is it private property, and how much work will that involve to get that, you know, purchase that property to do a project? That's always something to consider. Constructability, yeah, so that's like, obviously, is it can be, you know, special construction techniques or things that could add to cost. Also involve, you know, utility conflicts. You know, we have to move a huge duck bank, you know, so that's another thing to consider. Permitting is always important. You know, how difficult it will be to permit to different agencies, Fish and Wildlife, and the Corps of Engineers, and that really drives like the timing. And so that's important. Cost and funding opportunities. So this is really leveraging grant funds, which we've done a pretty good job in the city of Issaquah for, you know, our restoration projects, street habitat restoration projects. So it's really trying to, you know, leverage those grant opportunities and the timing of those grants. So that's important. And timing plays into the grant opportunities, and coordination and partnership with others. So, you know, whether we work with Washington State Department of Transportation and when they're doing projects. So obviously the culvert replacement projects in I-90 that are moving forward here in the next couple of years, that's an opportune time to work with them to do projects in conjunction with those projects. So that's a savings there. And we'll talk a little bit about that later here in the meeting, presentation. Regulatory requirements, you know, we satisfying any kind of NPDES requirement, obviously. Environmental and social justice. So we looked at that a little bit. You know, that's a little tricky, but there was metrics that we applied for that that we could use, trying to make sure we're doing projects that are fairly representative of the communities. And then finally, the public input. So, any questions on any of those metrics? Okay.
What are your metrics for the environment and equity?
You know, Trista, maybe you can, I think Trista really develops those. And that's one thing we did put in this slide, in this presentation, is sort of the numerical values of these things. I don't think we can do that, but maybe you can speak to that.
I couldn't hear. I know that it was about the social justice, but I couldn't hear the question.
Oh, what are some of the things we considered when we looked at the social justice, environmental? I think it was, I can't remember that.
Okay. Yeah. We did a pretty simple analysis for that. And let me pull it up. We looked by census tract, and we used the Environmental Protection Agency's environmental justice screening tool. And they have an index value that goes by census tract that attempts to measure numerous factors and about social equity, basically, and condense it all into a single index value. And we use the demographic index value. What we ended up doing was looking to see where kind of the breaking points were when we mapped it in the city limits itself. And we ended up trying to give more points if there were more inequality. Issaquah doesn't have high levels of inequality. The index value is actually compared across the entire United States. So there weren't, and when you take it by an entire census tract, it's not very granular. But we took census tracts that had above the 85th percentile of that index value, and the higher index value indicates greater inequality. We gave those projects an extra 3 points We gave 2 points if the index value was between the 70th and 85th percentile. 1 point if it was between the 55th and 70th percentile, and no points if it was below that.
Great, thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.
Okay, CIP status. So once again, we selected 10 CIPs as interested in explaining a little bit about that earlier. And currently working on developing the concept designs and the cost estimates. So that's really the next phase is to start working. They're working on those now, but we got to get that wrapped up in the next couple of weeks to finalize.
Pause you for a second, Alan.
Sure.
Nancy has a question.
Hi, Alan. So why 10 CIP projects? I have 2 questions that are kind of tied together. And why is there 1 in each basin? Are we leaving something up? Is there like, if we did 2 in one basin, we'd get a better bang for our buck? Or,
Well, I guess answer that question first. I think we had decided that it was important to have at least one in each basin. It was important to have a and I think the ones we chose are really good ones. Not like we chose one, there's one really good one that we decided, well, it's gonna fall out because we have to pick one for whatever basin, and it doesn't have one that was low. So I think all of them that we chose were, they made the top 23, right? Everything was in this top 23 of projects. And so I think it's important to remember that those 23 are still there, and we can still go back into those projects at any time. But I think that we need to recognize that we had to really narrow down to 10, just because that was a manageable number that we can implement within a reasonable amount of time, given our budget, our funding and so forth. So that seemed like a good number to shoot for. So I forget, that was the other question?
Well,
Yeah.
can I follow up on that? So if you looked at the 11th project that didn't make the cut, that was in maybe, let's say, the Old Town neighborhood, would you get a better bang for your buck if you would have put that project on the list instead of something somewhere else? And I just used Old Town as just one of the neighborhoods. So I guess I'm trying to understand. I still don't understand why we had to have one in every basin when, if you look at it from a cost benefit, what's giving us the best water quality and environmental benefits? What projects are doing the best for the city?
Well, I think, first of all, yeah, I hear what you're saying. And by the way, Old Town is our priority, is probably the highest priority of all our issues and the solutions. So that's number one. I think we just felt it was important to have one in each basin. I don't know, that was our criteria that we established.
So you didn't hear that from the community, or the council didn't say they wanted one in each basin? Was that where did you get any push that way?
Correct, no.
So that was just an internal decision that was made?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know, Trista, do you have much to add on that, or I think?
No, I think you covered it. It was a value from the beginning of this plan, that it would be citywide and broadly cover the geographic area of the city.
Yeah, I mean, just try to represent the city as best we could. So.
Yeah, Nancy, it was a great question. That's one thing on the following presentations and then to the subcommittee, presentation to the committee, council committee, that we could show us that this is the recommended, how shall I say it, distributed top 10. But if we were to go directly to the 10 straight numerically, this is what it would look like. So basically, it just kind of showed those bookends of the straight cut and this and what the pros and cons would be. I think that would be an easy way to do it. With the distributed model being what we were talking about, trying to touch everything. And we can explain very easily the pros and cons of that, and then flip to exactly what you're saying, like, oh, okay.
Here's the top 10 projects.
Exactly.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm trying to
Sure.
understand. What did you leave out to get it in every basin, or what? I know we're not seeing the top 10 projects, okay? So, and that's kind of what I'm pushing back on. What's the
Sure.
top 10 projects in the city? So anyway,
Sure. Yeah, and we can look at that. That's a good point. We can look at that comparison. But if we just rank them by score, then we compare that to, okay,
Right.
what did we miss?
And I think that's a great thing to present to council, because I think that same question will come up And maybe it's only one project. Wow, you guys did a great job. That's, that really will come out really well.
No, I agree. I appreciate your comment. Thank you. Take notes, Kristen. All right, final CIP list and map. I don't know, Tristan, you want to, this is really not to say this one, this is just to give you an idea of the basins in the city. So kind of geography of what we're talking about, the scale of the basins, size, relative sizes of the basins, and projects are, so. Anything?
Sure, I can go over this really quickly. So there are three different types of CIP in this map. Most of them are points, and you can see those as the orange dots. We have one that we are calling a linear CIP. We in the Tibbetts Basin, right near its confluence with Lake Sammamish. And then there is one that's actually a study. Oh, I'm using my mouse. I realize you can't see my mouse. I'm going to ask Alan, I'm going to request to control the screen, and then I think people will be able to see my mouse.
Excellent.
Can you see my mouse moving around?
Yeah.
Okay, so this polygon right here, this orange polygon, you see that I'm tracing with my mouse, is a CIP study of the Old Town area. Oh, nope, you can't see my mouse. Now you might be able to see my mouse. This is a CIP study of the Old Town area. As you can see, there are 4 CIPs in the Issaquah Creek Basin. And the other basin that has multiples is Tibbetts. I apologize, actually, it's Schneider. And then each of the others, or in Laughing Jacobs, has 2, depending on how you categorize SP13. This probably will be treating runoff that goes both to Laughing Jacobs and into Park Hill. So this is a potentially a particularly effective CIP treating water running off into 2 different water bodies. And yeah, there's a table here at the bottom allowing you to coordinate or look up the number and see what the project name is. And then on the next slide, there's actually a little more detailed list, which and you could change to the next slide, Alan. Or do I have to do that because I have control? Sorry, I'm new at WebEx, so I'm not sure.
I think so.
I think you're still.
I don't know how, though.
Okay.
I don't know how to move the slide.
Okay,
There we go. Okay, thanks. So this is a slightly more detailed list. This is in order first by basin and then by rank within the basin. And what we had planned to do at this meeting was take a kind of a quick look, a slightly more detailed look at each one of these CIPs. So the next few slides, the next 10 slides really, are a map of each one's location, and gives us a chance to talk about what's going on in that location and what we think the solution is. I'm actually going to release control if I can figure out how to do that. Let's see.
We can take.
Alan, can you,
I can't
Nancy has a question for us?
I'm sorry?
I just have one quick question. So about a year ago, we were getting feedback. So I don't have access to my internet right now, so I can't. About the impact of brake linings and tires
Yes,
on
yes.
salmon and kokanee. Do any of these projects potentially look at what we
Yes.
can do to improve things like that? Will you
Yeah.
We'll get into that, but really the retrofit projects that we're going to show you later here, they're addressing that. So there's water quality treatments. They're standard. They're using technology that's been around a while. And in fact, City of Issaquah, we have doing a study with Tacoma to look at the 6 BDQ treatment with our existing facility. So we're actually doing sampling of a wet pond and a cartridge system and a bioretention system. 3 different types of water quality technologies that have been around for 15, 20 years, and testing the effluent measurements and looking at the removal efficiencies of those types of systems with the 6PDQ, specifically looking at that. And it looks pretty promising. I don't want to go into the data, but it's looking pretty good. So at least for now, it looks like that those existing technologies are going to work and treat that in addition to the metals that they're designed to treat. And so, yes, we have several projects that will be retrofit projects where they're going to be treating roadways, impervious pollution generating surfaces that currently have no treatment. And that's the aim. And that's really the big part of what ecology wants to see in these SMAP type or SMOs is projects that really trigger or target retrofit projects for that very reason.
Thanks for explaining that. It's just hard to see that when you read through this, so thank you.
Sure.
Could I add one thing on that as well, too, just very quickly? There was a council request, I think, last year that we're working on to develop a GIS layer that shows all of our existing treatment. And what's going to be really important with that as we go through that is that it's really an asset management step to look at what are the facilities we have, when were they installed, what technology they have. Because Alan and I have been talking about this, it's very important to treat areas that don't have anything, that's great. But what about an area that has a lot of traffic and was, developed in 1990 and has really inferior technology? So, again, we're a little ways away from that, but I think that's what you're gonna, see in the future is a comparison of that we want to, push back a little bit on ecology if necessary and say, hey, we understand this basin doesn't have anything, but when you look over here, we think we should maybe skip this one for now and come back to that. But that's in the works.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point Gary brought up, is that's gonna really, when that work is all done, we're gonna have this GIS mapping that's gonna show where we have existing treatment, what area, how much acreage is it treating throughout the city, what type of treatment system is it, and then look at, okay, prioritizing, retrofitting, maybe areas that have older detention or wet ponds, which is lower, older technology, maybe we can upgrade those to a more of a high, what they call enhanced treatment that can deal with the heavy metals. So that's gonna be a great tool once we get that going.
So when you complete this study on the 6 PPDQ, I'd be interested to hear the findings of that. And then if you're willing to share that, I think the regional 6 PPQ subgroup would be very interested.
Yes, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I've at the various RIA meetings that I do attend, the technical committee meetings, and I brought this up. They've been interested in that because that group is looking at that as well. And so they were interested to know that Issaquah and Tacoma are collaborating on this. So
Fantastic.
okay, I do have control. All right, excellent. All right, so I think this is okay. So we're going to start with our 10 projects. This is the first one, and it actually, I'm not sure they're in order of priority, but this one happens to be the top of projects, and because this is very complex issues here, and so really it's going to involve us. We're looking at a study. Initially OTAC looked at sort of specific projects that could work, but it became pretty obvious pretty quickly that this is a really complex solution because you have so much happening in this basin. This area, Old Town. You have the internet. You have the Issaquah Creek, which has its own, creates its own problems with the floodplain, and then you have shallow groundwater. You have some high intensity land use areas, inferior or poor infrastructure, stormwater, old storm systems, and so this really is a more complex problem that really OTAC could have dealt with in terms of coming up with a solution, and we felt it was really suited for a more detailed analysis. And so I'm interested you're going to Shaylee was going to maybe hit on a few things about this project for CIP.
Thanks, Alan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I think just like Alan mentioned, this area, what you see on the map here, the orange polyline is basically 370 acres. It's Old Town. And the blue dots represent all these issues that we know that are flooding related issues. There's a lot of flooding happening here. On the left side, that blue line that you see is Issaquah Creek, and that sort of bluish polygon there shows the floodplain. So part of the problem is that the Issaquah Creek itself floods over its banks. And if you actually zoom into the map, which I know we can't do here, you'll see that there's a lot of development within the floodplain. So there's a lot of structures that get affected by that flooding. The other thing to note on this map, so all those hatches in yellow and green, there's an old town sub-area plan. So the city is also planning to develop these, and so basically encourage development in these areas. And there was consideration of allowing additional impervious on some of these parcels. And so there's also a thought of, because this area, just like Gary and Alan were both mentioning, where there's, there may be some facilities, but they were designed to really old standards and not as effective anymore. And so as this development occurs, the question was whether, regional facilities can be built that will provide flow control and water quality for all of this newer or this redevelopment happening in this area. So that was the other consideration. The other third piece that Alan mentioned, just because stormwater infrastructure is old, there are pieces that just don't have any pipes at all or catch basin. They don't have conveyance infrastructure. And so that is also part of the reason why it's really flat, and there's just like local ponding that happens on streets. And so because there's all of these problems happening in this area, and there is future development planned, the idea would be that this study would look at modeling the hydraulics of the stream, and also modeling and seeing how the stormwater infrastructure would interact with the stream. So it would be a combination of both of those things. And then also seeing whether regional facilities could be cited. If they could be, considerations like Alan was mentioning, groundwater is another one. But there'd just be a lot of pieces to study to be able to come up with, and it wouldn't be one solution. It would probably, just to come up with something comprehensive, it would need to be multiple smaller solutions in this area. And so the study would basically look at that. And I think this study, the thought was that it would get coordinated with King County's. They're studying Issaquah Creek and the floodplain associated with the creek. So it would get coordinated with that effort, and the effort that they're doing for their channel migration study. And I think CIS, Alan, you probably know what CIS stands for, but maybe you could talk to that.
So I think that's a great setup. Yeah, I just want to, so thank you for that overview of this. And I think I'm excited about this, and I'll get into CIS in a second, but the partnership, which again, we showed as a metric, this is huge, right? Because CIS is the capital investment strategy, which I believe King County Flood Control District has about 800,000 set aside for Issaquah in 5 and 6. We'll come back to you and give you that date for it. That's to kind of conduct their studies to come up with potential projects. Currently, this year they are doing a flood plain study, and next year a channel migration study. So all of this on their within the flood control district funding. So really, this project that we're highlighting here, we're going to propose to put dollars in our CIP to partner with that. So this really would be a county-city partnership over the next few years to look at, very start with regional solutions that can really get at reducing peak flows right during these larger events. That is really the serious issue. As all of you know, with the flooding, and the county is on board, at least at this point, to looking at potentially identifying and citing a project in the county, so we could pool our resources there. Of course, it could be in the city as well, but I think where we're both on the same page with the county and the city is where can we get, Nancy used the point, the biggest bang for our buck here. Where can we reduce peak flows as coordinated agencies first? Let's forget about the jurisdictional boundary. What makes most sense, and can we do that in a way that also benefits habitat? Could it be an off-stream type of storage? So that's where we're kind of headed with this, and it will be a multi-year project, but we can at least get started over the next couple of years working in concert with them.
I think that's great, working with the other agencies. Dan, you had a question?
Yeah, I think that's one of my questions. Gary, did you give a definition of what does CIS actually stand
Oh,
for?
sure, capital investment strategy.
Capital investment strategy. And then were some of the examples you were giving at the end, I guess I'm a little curious what feasibility of regional facilities for development are. I guess I don't know what that means. I'm curious if you can give examples or explain that a little more.
Sure, I can just think of a couple just offhand. Alan can probably think of a few, but there's, gray, of course, gray and green infrastructure.
Okay.
So I was thinking of the classic one would be some type of, we've done this a little bit, like that, off-channel storage, right? Where you have off-channel storage and potentially restoration, but you have peak flows during the winter months. So there would be some type of something like that. Could be gray infrastructure. Could be some type of. Redmond has done this quite a bit with their infiltration galleries, where collector peak flows and then infiltrate. So that's kind of what this would get at, is what are those possibilities, so that the locations and then the type. But we're open to any tools. Any tools.
And I'm sure Shealy has ideas in this, but I think some of the things we looked at is utilizing some existing parklands and where we could do some synergies with parks and stormwater, doing joint facilities, where it could be act as a function of the park, but also function as off-channel storage. In fact, we're looking at that with the parks master plan and for Tibbetts Manor Park, or Tibbetts Park, the name of the park here, and because they're going to be looking at redoing this whole master plan for the park, and they're working with stormwater in this master plan to see, how we can, site off-channel type facilities that would attenuate flows and so forth. So that's the idea. It might involve land purchases, so that's been part of this, is identifying parcels to purchase to do these joint. It could be a joint park, stormwater, flow control, as well as habitat. I mean, there's just so many things we can do here. So, yes, and the other important thing to note is that this is the modeling effort's huge, right? So the county's going to really pay for that effort to do all the hydraulic modeling, update the hydrology. We're going to look at climate change. We're going to scoped in there with their consultant to look at climate change, precipitation, future flow, future precipitation, how that will affect, the model flows. So it's a huge effort, and the county's, it's great that the timing couldn't be better with the county, honestly. And the other thing, the final note, is that the county does own several bank stabilization facilities in Issaquah. And these facilities that were put in years and years ago to stabilize the bank, mostly rock is what it really consists of. So they want to look at those facilities as part of this effort and see where they need to maybe modify them and change them and put in more fish-friendly facilities. There's a lot there to unpack, but it's so.
The answer to your question?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Dan, do you have a question?
Yeah, you had mentioned collecting the water and then releasing it later. Could it be collected into cisterns so you could release it like later in the summer when things need to be watered?
I can speak from experience on a basin in Seattle, Thornton Creek, a very large basin that we did, and this is, I'm dating myself a little bit, about 10 years ago, did look at that, but that is challenging to do, to kind of to get the right amount, the volume needed for individual cisterns. It's fairly large for a significant peak flow like this, so that's something we could look at this, but you have then what I would call an operational issue with that, to make sure that all the individual cisterns, no matter how large they are, be operated in the correct way, like you're saying, so in the winter, it's right, they have to be able to hold that back. So that's definitely a classic distributed system, but it's typically harder to make that actually happen when the rain's that heavy.
And can ponds be used for that without worrying about mosquitoes?
Well, we have ponds now.
Oh, yeah.
And that's always an issue with the what they call wet ponds, which are ponds that are designed to drain all the way out. They have sort of water sitting in all the time. That's how they work in terms of water quality. That's the water quality function of the pond. Yeah, mosquitoes are always an issue, but the good news, and I can speak to that because when I was with City of Renton, I was the West Nile virus coordinator, and so part of what we did was to go out and treat our stormwater ponds with larvicide. The good news is it's not an issue in this part of the country, in the Northwest. We don't really have West Nile virus. We don't have it. It doesn't, for some reason, doesn't like this area. The mosquitoes that we have don't, it's not an issue here, fortunately. But there are ways to treat the ponds using, I don't want to get all the details, but yes, it's something to be aware of, but it's generally not an issue for here, so. So, yeah, so.
So do you ever use those ponds to water in the summer?
You know, I'm not positive, but I think at the Highlands, the Issaquah Highlands, there are there's ponds up there which the city maintains, but I think there's an agreement with the homeowners associations up at the Highlands to use those ponds for irrigation.
Perfect. That's great.
Can I just remind folks just to speak up to make sure that folks that are joining remotely can hear. And these are our microphones, so outdoor voices.
Nancy, you had a question?
Well, I guess it's kind of a question and a comment. So I would encourage you to look at aquifer storage and recovery as you're looking at these offsite storage things. The reason I'd say that is there's funding at Ecology right now for much of that work. And if you take that and you take your wintertime water and you can inject it back into where we're getting our potable drinking water or in those areas so we're still maintaining stream flows, there's an opportunity to get greater water rights for your drinking water system. So you have two utilities that are benefiting from this from the city. So if you're really looking at that kind of system, I'd really encourage you to think outside the box and go into looking at that. I know of 2 jurisdictions right now that are getting funding from Ecology to do that type of work. So I just encourage you to try and think about if you're doing offsite storage or something like that, seeing if you can potentially get into some kind of piloting of injecting it and getting greater water out for groundwater.
Right, and I think actually Stacy can maybe speak to this in
Program
ecology, but and the city had participated in what they call in-stream flow. It's ecology's requirement where meter exempt or wells exempt wells out in rural areas. But basically, ecology was encouraging to maintain in-stream flows. You know, that we come up with projects that will do exactly what you're saying. And you're right, there are grants out there to for those type of projects. And so that's something we did look at when that requirement sort of, well, complicated, went by, it basically never got completed. And ecology is now taking over that whole process. But so that's something we can look at that. And I think some of these off-channel projects where you can have off-channel storage and allow the water to infiltrate and recharge the groundwater is beneficial for in-stream flows, like you said, but the problem is that we're so far downstream in the system that it's not as effective as opposed to being further up in the watershed. That makes sense.
I would push back on that comment on you, just as a comment. And I would say that if you look at it, our well fields are pretty much down in the valley, the city's drinking water well fields. So if you're trying to put more water in there so you can pump it out later, it's not just for in-stream flows, but also so you can continue to take water because your groundwater wells are drawing down your groundwater systems. I just think there's an opportunity here that's bigger than what you're talking about here. That's just my comment.
Okay, we'll definitely put it as we'll consider
Yeah,
that.
I think what Ellen and I can commit to, again, this one I think is I would dare say the largest project that we have here on this list, is that we would be coming back to you at a very early concept stage probably with the county as well. So this is something, and so I think, particularly in that's your input and your kind of solutions about ponds, cisterns. I think that's something we will kind of commit to saying we're going to look at a full toolbox here. We have to, right? We have to look at a full toolbox here in coordination with the county and kind of come back. And we'll be back early to the board on that when this goes through. This will be, just a multi-year. This is a huge opportunity. This is a huge multi-year effort, multi-coordination. So, but committing to start off early, having a wide scope, and then coming back in to that. So thank you. This is great comments.
Good comments, everybody. Thank you. All right, moving on. Number 2, SP 228, 229th Avenue, Southeast Water Quality Improvement Project. So this one is located in the Issaquah Basin. So over by So the I-90 interchange there, this north on at least takes Mountain Parkway. So this is the gravel plant, that road. And so this area is probably been problematic where there's a gravel area that when in heavy rains, it mobilizes sediment and it, the heavy flows, the velocities erode the gravel and the sand, and it ends up entering the North Fork of Issaquah Creek. So you get this plume of sediment that comes in the creek during, various storm events. I'm not sure what the storm event, but fairly frequently. And so this really was a project that we decided that we needed, high visibility in some ways, and we wanted to try to reduce that sediment load into the North Fork. And also there's other issues with, the gravel pit itself. There's been violations of the industrial permit, similar to our NPDS industrial permit, where they have to manage their runoff, and there's been violations there. And so we thought this would be a good project to really try to do some treatment, because the North Fork does enter is a tributary to Issaquah Creek, and it'd be important to treat that runoff. So it rose to the top of one of the higher prioritized projects. So, and Trista, did you want to add anything on this?
Alan, no, I think you covered it pretty well. It's a water quality improvement project and a drainage improvement project for 229th Avenue Southeast.
Yeah, and just quickly add that WashDOT several years back now, was 2016, I think, did a culvert project. They actually realigned part of the North Fork and put in 2 new culverts there to cross East Lakes Mountain Parkway. So anyhow, that they made it fish passable.
You'd be building onto that.
Yeah, exactly.
That gravel area you refer to, that's Issaquah property? Right away?
Part of it is private property, some of it's actually limited access WashDOT property, and city property. So,
Okay.
So that would be a coordinated effort to deal with those folks. So,
If I
And even, I was going to just say something more about that. We would need to investigate whether a facility could be sited in or near that gravel. But even if we just provide better drainage down 229th Avenue Southeast, which is a very steep street, doesn't have drainage infrastructure on that side of the road, and runoff sheet flows onto that gravel area. So even if we just provide a collection and conveyance system, we'll have less muddy runoff onto 66th, I'm sorry, because there won't be any run on into the gravel. So we'll have less run off onto the street likely. But we will investigate also a water quality facility.
Interesting.
Were you
Thank
going
you.
to say something, Shaylee?
Oh, I was just going to say, so this also talks to, I think, when we were talking about 6 ppd quinone, like when we look at water quality, that this is like a street that has a lot of trucks. So we would look at, trying to use the BMPs that might address that. So that is something that we would, try to put in, so that because of the tire runoff, as well as metals from the trucks and oil and grease. So we'd be looking at all of those pollutants of concern in order to figure out which facility or what type should put in. Yeah.
Thank you. Cameron, any other questions?
Thank you, Don. Back in 2016, 17, Evergreen were looking to develop their Lincoln dealership there. Obviously, that has been abandoned, I'm assuming, since we've still got the old shed there. Or
Right. I don't have the update on that. It's really the permitting department, where that stands. There was a floodplain. We had to do a floodplain map update there that was never done, and so that was, we think, recently completed to a letter map revision, basically, which should have been done by WashDOT, post project. You're supposed to do a map, rise mapping post project. It's called LOMAR, and they did not do that. So we ended up doing that. But yeah, I don't know the status of the dealership.
We don't get back on that one.
Yeah, just wondering how it plays into the.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen their conceptual plans. Yeah, it really is not gonna have any impact on them. I mean, they're doing their own treatment on site, of course, for their impervious parking and so forth, but.
But this does, I think, I think it's a good comment because in some of the other comments that all three of you made, where this is definitely one of those partnership projects where we will need to talk to the stakeholders, whether they're part of the solution or not. Financially, we're gonna have to work with those three agencies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, it's a good point because I'm not sure what the plan is for Southeast 66, if they're gonna improve that roadway, if they're required to do any frontage improvements along there.
That's what it was.
If they are, then that would be obviously, yeah, we would want to coordinate with them.
Exactly. Taking the routes to the street days,
Yeah.
I believe that's a great implementation.
Yeah, excellent, okay.
And we have a question from Dan as well.
I think it's mostly been answered. That's what I just want to clarify. So it sounds like there's multiple owners of that gravel lot. And some of it's private.
Yeah, right, yeah, we looked at this a while back. We were gonna try to do we thought we could do a simple fix, but, and it turned out that it was a little more complicated than I thought, in terms of, it's not so much whether there's land ownership, but whether there's some utilities.
Okay.
If we wanted to sort of put in some conveyance piping to take it to the other direction. Because right now it goes into North Fork of the Issaquah Creek, right? And we were thinking of taking it to the other direction, but then the problem with that is you're separating the basins, you're taking water that was in one basin to another basin, and that violates some, depending how far they recombine again, that's not a good thing. So
I was just curious if there's feasibility. You mentioned resurfacing this in the slide here of actually de-paving it. I don't go by there much, but I feel like when I do, you don't see any use of that parking lot. And I'm just curious if there's, for me, that would make even more sense, and I don't know if that would be more cost efficient or long-term benefits than, the conveyance system, but I'm just curious if that would be something to explore, in terms of actually just de-paving that section there, but.
Right.
Anyway, thank you.
No, I think, Dan, I think that's a great point too, of these are early, the concept phase of this, and I think, looking at, yes, we're looking kind of at, we're talking about capital solutions, but it can also be, as we're going through these, think about, is there something operationally or repair or rehab wise that we could do that instead of a capital project? So I think that's, you're gonna see that with all of these projects as well too. This is, from the preliminary ranking, these look like the best ones for a capital project, but there may be offshoots because of what we find out.
Right. Well, I think, my bias is very habitat. So, that's the actual buffer of the North Fork right there in that parking lot. So I can see some multi benefits there too. Great. Thank you guys.
Put it back to the forest.
That's,
Forest and condition.
Alan, you know me well enough. That's my solution for a lot of things.
Give you credit for that.
Yeah.
All right, next project, Mighty Hill Creek Issaquah Creek floodplain enhancement culvert replacement near Wildwood Boulevard. So this really came out of some of the comment or issues that our maintenance department operations had identified. And this really is, I think it's a good project because it really is it targets a lot of different benefits. Essentially what happens is high velocity flows during storm events come down Mighty Hill Creek, which is this creek right here. And right before it, there's a culvert that crosses Wildwood Boulevard. So right before that culvert, an inlet side of the culvert, there's a big trash rack and it kind of create like a sedimentation basin of sorts where the water comes down and it moves gravel, which is a natural process from the hillsides, mass wasting, moves it down, which, you do want gravel recruitment. That's how you get gravel into the streams that help the fish for spawning. And so, but the problem is that gravel piles up there, and then if it's not maintained on a regular basis, bigger storms, it will basically flood the roadway, Wildwood Boulevard Southwest. And so by doing the project we're proposing is really looking at putting in a bigger culvert, more likely a box culvert that's fish passable. And this is also, I believe, Trista identified as a fish passage issue. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so in terms of the issues, we looked at also the database from WFW that has all the identified fish passes, issues within the city of Issaquah, and this is one of them. So it basically put in a box culvert that would make it fish passable, and then daylight everything else downstream of there, down to Issaquah Creek, the stretch that's in the park, Mine Hill Park, so that could maybe be daylighted. And so that would provide some fish habitat, stream habitat, a fish passable box culvert, and allow the gravels to move through naturally, and then of course eliminate a maintenance headache and save some money. Because like I said, the city maintenance has to go out there periodically to move that gravel. So I think, yeah, so that was essentially the summary. Any questions? Next project, SP 172, culvert capacity increase in Front Street crossing of Lewis Lane tributary. So this project, I don't know, Tristan, you want to take this one on? I'll just kind of go over it, but essentially this is one that came up pretty frequently. There are a lot of hits on issues here that we identified for the Issaquah Creek assessment that we had done, and all the outreach and the public comment, and where we had the map, the web map where people could put pins and discuss the issues. And this area really along 6th Avenue Southeast, there's a lot of concerns of flooding along here, and it's a combination of some undersized pipes. There's also culvert crossing. So this is Lewis Lane tributary up here, and then there's a trib to that, which is this one right here, and it crosses underneath 6th Avenue Southeast, and that culvert's undersized. So the thought was here, because it seemed to be a fair amount of public comment on this, that you would look at investigating doing some type of improvement along here, whether it's upsizing conveyance systems, putting a new culvert crossing here, so something to that effect. So I don't know, Trista, do you want to, or maybe GLA, you want to chime in on it, or?
I think you mostly covered it, Alan. There's a lot of flooding complaints in the area, and the project is really investigating the drainage system and coming up with a solution to manage or avoid that local flooding.
Okay.
We need to do some investigation to figure out which exact elements of the system need to change, but that's really what it's intended to solve.
Okay, thank you.
So let me add one thing here back to something Nancy said very early on, is that as we go through these, all of these projects to the concept level, we'll be better documenting the cost of the project, but also the benefits as well, right? So that is why, this is why it's great to have this playbook of all these projects that we can't get to right away. If we do find that something just is not looking right in terms of cost benefit, that's when we may have an off ramp. But we again, I think that's something we come back to you and council before stopping it. We would say, hey, we're at 30% design. This is really good at the beginning. Now that we've dug into it more, the cost benefit, even with externalities of social benefits, environmental benefits, might not look good. So I think that's what we want to commit to you as well. Is we're not just going to go blind, blinders on with these projects. We're going to each step we're going to look at this, and again, if something doesn't pan out, we want to come back to you and tell you why, and maybe we should put this on hold, or again, something Nancy said too. Maybe it's better for a later time in combination with another project. So that context. Thank you.
All right, moving on. Okay, Spanish Cove Park, you have that in. All right, so this project is over near the state park. This is a portion of Snyder Creek. the portion downstream of I-90. So a couple things going on with this project. This was really, I think, one where we felt we could combine it or work with WashDOT in terms of what they're doing, because they're right now they have plans to do several culvert crossing replacement or culvert replacement projects on I-90 to satisfy the requirement to meet the mandate that they have to replace all these culverts within a 10-year time frame that are fish issues, they're non-fish passable. And so this is one of them. So basically the Snyder Creek is a non-fish passable culvert, so they need to go in there and replace this culvert. And we thought that, well, this would be a good time to look at doing some channel improvements. So this is really looking at, so we tried, like I said, looking at a mixed bag of water quality projects, flooding projects, and habitat projects. And this is one where we thought would be a good opportunity to do a stream enhancement or habitat project downstream of I-90. Similar to what we're doing now with, right now, in construction, the city's doing the Lower Issaquah Creek Restoration Project. It's a great project there near Costco where we're restoring, putting in side channels, backwater channels, and putting in large woody debris, and that will be completed at the end of this year. So be more about that if you want to go out and look at it. But anyhow, this is the kind of thing we're talking about here, doing some improvements along this portion of Schneider Creek. And, basically, if WashDOT's going to come in with a culvert to upsize and make it fish passable, then it only makes sense to then improve the downstream section for fish. So, coordination with WashDOT, opportunity there to share in some of their design efforts. So any questions on that? Trista? Got anything, Shaylee?
Upstream there's been some wetland and riparian enhancements, just FYI. And the City Parks Department downstream in the vicinity of our project area has been doing native plantings for a while. I believe they've finished that effort, but the in-stream enhancement would be designed to kind of coordinate or complement the more riparian upland plantings that Parks has taken care of. So this is one where we hope by coordinating with both WashDOT and the city parks efforts that we do really get a lot of bang for the buck on this type of project.
I just add a little bit on there if I may. I think this one will also, I think we talked about, be highly competitive in grant opportunities for a couple of reasons. Primarily, for two reasons. One, the coordination with the WashDOT project, but two, other work that has already gone on. So I think those two, and there's a third that it's somewhat limited scope and area. So I think this is one that really ranked high in that potential opportunities for grant funding, which again we're pretty successful at here at Issaquah. But this is, I think, one that will be.
What's on the upstream side of, what's on the other side of the freeway? Where, is that down at Formula or is that down at the brewery or is it? I'm just trying to figure out where it comes out on the other side.
Yeah, no, it's the, Atlas, what's the name of that?
Anthology.
Anthology.
I think between what Arena Sports and.
Okay, never mind, thank you. I just didn't know where the upstream
Yeah, I
side
was
was.
trying to figure that out. Is that?
Can I just ask a quick question? That is all city, is a small part of it on private property near the mouth of Schneider Creek, or is most of the creek well within city property there in the park? It's hard to tell on this map.
I'm not entirely sure. I mean, some of it might be like the outlet there to the lake, maybe on private property.
So there might be like a talk with the neighbor on easements
Probably,
for
yeah.
access or buffer and stuff. Okay, cool.
Yeah, good point. Okay. Let's move on to the next one here. SP 65, Cougar Ridge Stormwater Conveyance Improvements. So, yeah, the problem is you don't really have an idea of where this is. We had that map earlier that showed it, all the projects, but it's kind of hard to tell when you zoom in where it is. But this is up on Cougar Ridge, so it's a Snyder Creek Basin, so just upstream of the creek we're just looking at, upstream on the hillside of Cougar Mountain, off of Newport Way. Does that give you a good sense of where we're talking about here? Anyhow, it's a subdivision where there's a flooding not only along, within 193rd Place, but also Southeast 56th Street, which has occurred in the past. Once again, when we get these higher velocity storms where there's erosion, scouring of, the hillside, and it deposits gravel and sediment just upstream of where it connects. So basically the stream connects into the system here, storm system here, and then the gravel deposits there, clogs. If it's not maintained sufficiently enough, or if we get a big enough storm where it overwhelms the storage with behind that structure, the inlet structure with the trash rack on it, then it will flood. And so similar to the other project I talked about earlier, this would essentially improve that, basically do something to improve that, whether it's putting in and the problem here is, it's a little bit different because there's no creek, there's no Issaquah Creek right downstream of it. So the problem is that the sediment would go into the storm system, the local storm system, so that would have to involve some type of I guess that's something we have to think about. How would we do there? More likely upsizing the pipes to the collection system. So that's a little bit tricky one. I don't know, Trista, do you want to add anything to that?
I think there's an issue about access for maintenance as well. So we'll be looking at improving maintenance access or ensuring that it's easier to maintain, as well as requiring less frequent maintenance. This partly made it on the priority list because of the amount of effort that city operations is putting into maintaining that structure, needing to suck out the sediment so frequently, and even not being able to keep up with it, so that at times the neighborhood does flood a little bit. So we should improve the situation for city operations, and we'll be considering maintenance access.
So for clarification here, the open channel is coming in from the left into the storm system at that first purple square?
Correct. Yeah, so likely it would involve maybe, like Tristan said, better access and some type of a more formal structure that's still gonna have to collect the sediment. I mean, there's no getting around that. We can't pass it through, otherwise it would go into it's not like we can pass it through into the creek. So, so it's gonna involve a maintenance type facility that will have to be made, where they're gonna come in with trucks, tractor trucks, and clean it out. But just a more efficient system, I guess, as opposed to how it is now, which it just fills up too frequently. So maybe it involves excavating more, to put in a larger like sedimentation basin or something like that.
Then this can be when we get into looking at the upstream, the sources, right? What are the sources? Is there something we can do to increase the amount of sedimentation that's occurring or something?
Yeah, like I said, it's a natural process. That's how our creeks get replenished with their gravel, and we're sort of choking it out with these when we build these storm systems. But so we got to figure out a way to trap it, and so it doesn't flood, and remove the material more efficiently, basically what it comes down to. So, yeah. Any more comments, questions?
When the gravel gets removed, then is it put into the Issaquah Creek in an area that might need some gravel?
Yeah, there's no requirement for that. It's not like mitigating anything. It basically, our crews just, I'm not sure, I think they stockpile and dry it out a bit, and then they get sent off. I'm not sure where they send it exactly. We have several of these facilities. Actually, one right here. The Tibbetts Manor Sedimentation Basin, which is just right off of Tibbetts Creek right here. And in fact, that's one where and I have to bring it up now, even though it's not on our top 10, it's not on our top 10 because we're already addressing it. So there's a study out there that we're going to begin that's going to look at how we can remove that sedimentation basin and allow the gravel to migrate through and not cause flooding. Replenish the gravel downstream, and of course eliminating all the maintenance costs, because right now we're spending like $40,000 a year, I think, to maintain this sedimentation basin, remove gravel out of it. It requires permitting, the operation has to permit it every couple of years, so we're working with Trout Unlimited, and we got a grant from King County to study this system, correct? To study this system all the way, so this is a good example of like I said, leveraging grant money. It's gonna solve a problem, it's gonna save us money in the long run, it's gonna help eliminate flooding and help the fish. But it's not in this list because we're already addressing it. So these are projects that are not, we want to incorporate into our CIP. This one already is in our CIP in the future, so.
That's great news. Thank you so much for doing that.
Well, actually, Gary was spearhead a lot of that effort to that grant, so. All right, SP 43, East Lakes Managed Parkway Water Quality Retrofit. So here's the first one that will be a retrofit. We're going to talk about as far as the retrofit project. This is on the East Lakes Managed Parkway. That we identified as an area that has high ADT. And of course, if we had this ADT, so that's a average daily traffic. So it's a count, how many trips or average daily trips rather. And so I forget what the threshold for high is, but it basically has a lot of traffic. Yeah, on a daily basis, generating a lot of pollution, a lot of tire dust, a lot of oils and grease. So this would be a prime candidate to do some type of retrofit. As Gary mentioned earlier, with this GIS layer we're trying to put together, this GIS layer would when it's fully built out, would basically identify areas like this that, hey, there's no treatment here. This road was built in the whenever 70s, and so back then there was no treatment, and so and it has high ADT, so we should definitely target this as a retrofit project. So that's a good example of what we're proposing to do. And this was included, and so this project was also, so let me just back, one more thing I want to add. In addition to the effort we're doing here with the Stormwater Source Water Master Plan for Issaquah, the city of Sammamish is also developing what's called the Laughing Jacobs Creek Basin Plan, and the city partnered with them because about 20% of the watershed of Laughing Jacobs Creek is in Issaquah. Even though the majority of it is up in the Sammamish Plateau, the most important part in terms of fish use is actually in Issaquah. So Laughing Jacobs Creek is very important for kokanee. They use that system for spawning, and so it's a critical habitat for them. And so, as part of the Laughing Jacobs Basin Plan that Sammamish developed, we basically are going to use their information. We took their plan that they finally finalized, and we peeled off some of the projects that they came up with, and so we didn't have to, basically be redundant in our efforts. And this is one of two that we're going to use that they recommended. So once again, we did try to collaborate as much as we could with them to develop this CIP. Okay, any questions? SP 230, yes.
Is the high school, are the schools that are being built going to be a big issue for that project?
Well, they're gonna, the high school and elementary school, well, they're gonna have to do their own mitigation, right? They're gonna provide their own treatment for their site in terms of water quality detention. So it's not really, this is actually, this is on, not even, we're gonna get to that. There's another project closer to that, to the school district projects, but this is over on, and it's on East Valley, or East Lakes Managed Parkway. So it's not really gonna be impacted by the school, those two schools. However, this project, SB 230 Southeast 43rd Way, roadway treatment, stormwater treatment retrofit, that is just downstream of those two schools. But once again, even though the schools will discharge into the system that does end up down here, they do have to do their own treatment. So this is strictly treating the runoff from Southeast 43rd, retrofitting to treat it. And the city upstream of that, just upstream is a section of Southeast 43rd where the city did a signal project and an intersection improvement project maybe 2 years ago. And that that project did put in 2 water quality, or 2 detention tanks and a modular wetlands to treat that area. So this would just kind of help to continue that treatment all the way down to 43rd. So
Alan, we have about 20 minutes left.
Oh.
So.
I think we're almost getting to the end. SP 32 West Lakes Managed Parkway Water Quality Retrofit. So this is the Lewis Creek Basin. I'm not sure, so you want to take this one on, or maybe let me take it on. I think I'll do this one as well. So this project is another retrofit project. So once again, a washdot is going to be in the process of designing, and they're going to replace the Lewis Creek culvert with a $50 million culvert, series of 4 box culverts across I-90. So this would be working with them, trying to coordinate with them. And part of that work is going to involve actually modifying West Lakes Managed Parkway because of the way the creek goes underneath. It goes underneath I-90, it also goes underneath the West Lakes Managed Parkway. Because of the grade issues, in order to get a box culvert in there, they have to raise the grade of West Lakes Managed Parkway. So they're going to modify that roadway a bit. And we thought, well, that's a great time to once again go in there and work with them and maybe collaborate together, a joint project, and at the same time, they're going to be there tearing up the road. Let's go ahead and put in some treatment, a system to treat the runoff on that roadway.
Alan, just to be clear on that one, they would not, it's not like we're taking over their requirement to do this, we're doing extra, kind of combining resources.
Yeah, okay. And of course, that would help treat, high pollutants that enter Lewis Creek, which once again is a kokanee bearing stream, highly productive stream. So it has those benefits as well. So it seemed to make a logical sense to target this for retrofit. So
The treatment area to this looks fairly small.
yeah, I'm not sure if we talked about that. How big that area would be.
Although the dot is in one location, there might actually be several like smaller facilities along a longer extent of West Lake Sammamish Parkway there. So we'd be treating probably more than that. So as Gary mentioned, WashDOT will have a requirement to provide treatment for any pavement they modify as part of their culvert replacement project. And what we would be proposing to do is coordinate with them and at the same time provide either an upsized facility or additional facilities that could be constructed in roughly at roughly the same phasing to treat more area. And we've got, we could go either direction from the crossing over Lewis Creek or both directions for facilities in the right of way. And again, this is a road that has quite a lot of traffic. So that 6 ppd quinone issue, the tire wear particles, and its significant impact on fish is something we'd be keeping in mind and making sure that we select types of BMPs that can treat 6 ppd quinone, or remove it, I should say, from the runoff.
Great.
Oh, that was the last one. So, any questions?
Tom, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the backlog. Okay, here's some great projects we're gonna work on, but then there's this huge backlog, and the tools and methods and our understanding of the science behind all this is improving greatly, and all that. Is there any hope that our backlog would get smaller, or will backlog just keep getting bigger and bigger? I don't know, and how would you measure the city of Issaquah's response to these problems compared to other jurisdictions? Kind of in line with what is typical any jurisdictions in this area, or is the city of Issaquah doing a bang-up job above and beyond what others are doing, or how do we sit with that?
Yeah, a few questions there. One of the, just our backlog. So two things on the backlog. One, when you look into the project we're kind of proposing here, the backlog that we have now, what will be, we're working on our 23-24 budget right now as we speak. You're going to see that. You're going to see a few of these projects on there, but not a lot. The current rate study ends in 25. So we'll probably in 24 be starting a new 5 to 6 year rate study, and all this backlog will be worked into that for these projects. But for the larger backlog of when will it stop, I think you're just gonna, unfortunately, in the stormwater world, we're gonna be addressing issues for quite a while. So I think we're gonna be addressing these, and then there's gonna be more coming up. That just seems to be the nature of stormwater, whether it's flooding due to climate change or just more particular pollutants that we didn't know are causing issues, but now we know they're causing issues. So don't have a crystal ball, but I think this is definitely a good portion of the backlog, but I don't think this is going to end it. And then compared to where we are, frankly, I think we're, and again, we can maybe show this to, this could be maybe another discussion, but I'd say we are very high on the high end of how we're approaching stormwater in Issaquah for the region. And in Redmond, where I worked before, it's another good example. But for the amount of population that we have, for our CIP, when you look at that, it's pretty impressive. The variety of products, especially on the restoration end, that Alan talked about earlier. One of the things we really are trying to do here is address flooding, water quality, and habitat. And I think we look at portfolios for other cities and counties in the area, we're pretty high up there. And I think we have that respect. When we talk to others in our jurisdiction, they're pretty impressed with what we do here in that. Not that we don't have work to do, we do.
we have this, maybe I can even give it, present it, but there's a map and a list of all the restoration, looking at restoration, for example, of all the restoration projects Issaquah has done over the last 20 years. And it's quite an impressive list. It has a map of every project we've done, how much it costs, when it was completed. And so we really, I think from the restoration standpoint, we do a great job. We follow the RIA Salmon Recovery Plan, which is this, basically they went through this similar process. They rank projects that would help do the best job recovering salmon. And so we're following that list. They're going in that plan and plugging the projects that were high priority in there and putting them in. And we're completing one of those projects right now. And in our current CIP, we have another project that's from that list called the Squaw Valley South Restoration Project. So I think this squad's doing a great job with the restoration end of it. Like I said, we have old infrastructure, and it's going to be a never-ending job to identify where we have failing infrastructure, and that's where asset management can come in. And so there's this, stormwater. There's a lot of job security in stormwater, and with all the permitting requirements. And I want to add that we do leverage a lot of grant funding also from ecology to do these retrofits. So there's money out there specifically targeting retrofits, and we've already got three grants for 3 different projects for ecology that we need to be implementing here that are already been on this list. Other areas that we identified as high priority, high use, high intensity, high pollution generating areas that we're going to be treating. One's in Old Town, Dogwood Street. We're going to be one there. Actually, 2 are in Old Town. So we're still, like I said, this is only what we've identified for this process, but there's so many other projects that are on this list that aren't in the top 10. And who knows, as time goes on, we may try to say, hey, this other one, because one of the things is we look at the frequency of the issue. How often does it occur? And so some of these problems have been identified as problems, but the last couple of years we haven't quite maybe seen as much of an issue. So, but then there could be another problem that comes up. And so then, like I said, this has to be a fluid document where we can modify as needed. But this is our best guess, not a guess, we look hard at all the issues and try to come up with some methodical way to narrow it down to something we can manage in our budget. You know, we have limited funds, and and like I said, trying to leverage other sources of funding as best we can. So that's, yes, it's the list is never gonna go away. The backlog is always going to be there. Right?
Yeah, I wouldn't expect the backlog to ever go to zero, but it's kind of like, we're mitigating problems of the past. But are we making headway such that, are we adding to the list because of future development mistakes? Or, I'm guessing that we raised the bar enough that future development is not adding as much as we did in the past, because we didn't know better. Correct. Now we do know better. And so there is hope. I guess it's like,
this is all old, these are problems that have been around a while. I mean, like you said, that, current, permit requirements, our stormwater requirements, new development they have way high standards now. So they're doing a pretty good job of mitigating all their impacts from water.
I think that you really brought a great point here. I think what we want to, Alan brought up the term asset management. I think we want to be eliminating surprises, right? New issues, so that we better understand how infrastructure is working, likely to fail. We can then plan ahead for it, so that we can keep a stable rate profile, so that we know how much work we can take on and not get a really big surprise like, oh my goodness, like this facility just failed out of the blue. Right, so I think that's another thing where a difference you're going to see going forward as we better understand how our system works by taking this more of an asset management. Great question here.
Nancy, you had a question?
So last time you were here, we talked a little bit about doing partnerships with private entities, maybe instead of always doing it through Title 18, like doing a stormwater facility, on their property per se, instead of just buying into a regional facility along the way. Thinking bigger, of getting something like a bigger bang for our buck. And it seems like the work you're doing in the Old Town Sub-Basin is an opportunity for something like that to happen. Or are you still considering that?
Absolutely.
Instead of doing little projects here and there, just get a big one and.
You nailed it, Nancy. I'm really glad you brought that up. So I think that's part of the toolkit. So what we talked about earlier, right, for Old Town is going to be probably a number of solutions, right? But let's say that a regional facility is part of the solution. Then we talk about how to finance it. So one thing that we could do could not just be, this is really pushing the cutting edge. Again, other people have done this, but instead of just being county and city, this could be private developers could pay into this. Right. Instead of doing something on their property, right, if we feel there's a bigger benefit. So absolutely.
I think that's a great
idea. Yeah, so we're gonna, and I think we you mentioned Title 18, Title 16 is also, I think you've seen a touch on that as before, with the floodplain management and stormwater code. We're allowed to do that. So we actually, it gives us, the current titles give us the authority to do that if it makes sense. So we actually have that opening to do that. So we just now have to look at how that might work.
And we didn't mention in here, but when NOTAC looked at this early on, the Old Town, we did look at what's called the fee and lieu program. I think what you're referring to is you pay in, you pay into it. So that would be something to look at. That's a big, that's a big
great opportunity to get a better bang for the buck, as we were talking about. My second question.
If I can add just one piece to that, I think when we're doing the fee and lieu, the other interesting piece is you could also look at low impact development plus retrofit facilities. So some of the things you were talking about in terms of, you were talking about cisterns, it's just other ways. So the whole idea behind low impact development is you infiltrate as much as possible in a more distributed fashion. So the idea would be, if the developers could do portion of low impact development on their properties and then also connect into a regional facility. So there would be various kinds of combinations, and it would incorporate a lot of the things that you guys are talking about. So that would be studied as part of the study, I guess. Just wanted to add that.
Then my second question for you is your relationship with parks and how, because they're a big part of it. And I guess what's triggering this is they recently sold some carbon credits over here on Cougar Mountain, I think it was. They had some land that they acquired, and they're saving the trees, and someone bought the carbon credits. They brought that presentation to us. And I guess the thing I'm thinking about is, how is your interaction with parks? Because they have big parcels of land that they manage that are great opportunities and locations that it seems like there should be a big partnership with stormwater and parks.
And actually, there is a very good relationship. So I work with Jennifer Fink all the time. And in fact, we collaborate on several projects. Well, in the past, in fact, the project that I'm constructing now, Lower Issaquah Creek Habitat Restoration Project over by Costco, and that was as parks. We work with parks. We actually use stormwater funds because they don't, to actually make the purchase, to buy the properties when they get identified for purchase, and then we do a joint project there. So that's a joint project where we're putting in all this salmon habitat. We're also putting in a trail through there, and we've done it with other projects all along Issaquah Creek. So yes.
And just to add that Jennifer Fink is off, if you mentioned her name, so I'll mention her again. She's going to be part of the King County collaborative work. So we're actually announced part of this as well, starting a monthly just meeting with King County, everybody floodplain from King County and from this spot. And we're going to include Jennifer in that for the next couple of years, just so we're completely coordinated. So and they'll bring in their parks folks as they need to too. But yeah, it feels like a really good collaboration here. Two examples: Issaquah Creek, of course, and then Tibbetts. We're just really working together collaboratively.
Thanks.
It's very exciting, actually.
Any other comments from the board? Okay. Thank you for your presentation. You guys have clearly done your homework. I think the projects you're bringing is a good subset of the ones you looked at. I think it's a good distribution across the city and a good combination of different types of projects that you're looking at. I would encourage you that as time goes on, you both mentioned that it's an ever-changing world in stormwater. Be flexible. Don't commit to a certain set of projects and get too far down the road, because we all know that regulations change and they could change drastically in the next 5 years. So take an approach of looking at these every few years.
And so I quickly add in terms of, the types of, whether we chose projects of the flooding, habitat, restoration, we did have that discussion with, I know with council, we talked about and wanted to get their feedback of where they thought the priorities wanted to be. I think they everyone, flooding is obviously a big concern, but they said, don't forget about the habitat. Issaquah is salmon central. They had conversations with Council President Hunt on medication, and she really, she really likes to be involved in all the salmon recovery efforts and sees that those restoration projects are important. So we want to make sure we include those in there. So we are salmon city.
And I will tell you, I work regionally in the stormwater world quite a bit. And Tom, to your point of is Issaquah being progressive with their CIP work? I think in the world of stormwater, yeah, they are. That's what stacks up with the other cities I know around here. Thank you, gentlemen.
See you soon.
Thank you. Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Krista.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, Shaylee.
Good to meet you.
Meet you too. Great job.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, Stacy, let's move this along. Do we have any reports from the environmental board?
Yeah, I'll just talk about the board schedule and then a quick update on the ICAP implementation. So board schedule, no major updates have been made to that since our last meeting. I do need to confirm with CPD that they'll be here in August to talk about the natural environmental checklist. And especially incorporating the feedback that the board provided to them at our spring meeting. You may know Lucy left the city, so some of that work, I think they're still figuring out how to hand off. So just a possibility that we may need to delay that topic, but I'll work with them this month to try and tee that up. The other topic for August I'm excited about is to talk about our update on the climate vulnerability assessment. We'll probably have some discussion questions coming to the board. And then Leishan from our staff will also be here to give us an update on the emergency management plan. So it'll be a very full meeting in August. And just to note, Nancy, too, you mentioned the wastewater. I apologize. That was a carryover from an old schedule that ended up on our agenda for tonight. But as Gary mentioned, we will be bringing the wastewater plan around quarter 3.
Can I ask another schedule question? And I know Parks had mentioned that they would like to come back and talk with us again about what their Parks Master Plan and stuff is.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're thinking, but I'm just hoping that they do come back sometime this year.
Okay, great. I'll check in with Jeff. Any other questions, feedback on board schedule? Just brief update on ICAP implementation. We are just launching our heat pump campaign finally. We're going to have our first workshop for residents at the end of this month. We'll be doing a lot of promotion about that over the next few weeks. There'll be workshops then happening about every 2 to 3 weeks after that through September. I presented to the Planning, Development, and Environment Committee of the Council last month to request the funding for the low income component of that program. They were very supportive. They wanted to see more budget and effort going to that component of the program in the future. I'll be putting that request to full council on Monday. It's actually going to be on the consent agenda, so we're hoping to receive that support on Monday. Clean Buildings Program, we presented on that program to the council committee back in June. There were some concerns, recommendations for shifting our priorities with less of a focus on profit companies. Our lights are blinking in here, Billy. So, it's telling us it's too late, time to go home. So we've somewhat shifted not necessarily shifted the focus, shifted a component of that program to look at energy efficiency in existing buildings, not solely focused on the buildings that have to comply with the clean building standard, but also working with other buildings that are interested in doing energy efficiency upgrades. So a bit of repackaging of that program, and that will also go to council on Monday. We did put out an RFP for support of that work back a month or so ago, and we've identified a consultant that we'd be working with, assuming that council approves that budget request. So we'll be ready to go and negotiate that scope of work after Monday if it's approved. Climate vulnerability assessment, much more will come to you in August on that, but work is underway. We held our first staff workshop at the end of June, and we're now scoping the community engagement piece. We heard positively from Department of Commerce that we were successful in a grant opportunity from them that will allow us to greatly expand our community engagement piece, as well as the types of tools that come out of this program, the types of communication tools that come out of the assessment. So we'll have a lot more direct interaction with communities that are probably highly at risk for climate impacts, but we'll also be building in some broader community engagement opportunities, somewhat similar to what was done for the ICAP development. That Commerce grant, I'll talk more about that in August, but it will also provide us resources to integrate results of the climate vulnerability assessment into the comprehensive plan. There's a number of parallel conversations happening with King County on wildfire preparedness and heat events. They're launching a big heat planning strategy. So we're working to really intersect that effort with the vulnerability assessment as well as with the emergency management plan. So a lot going on there. A couple more quick updates. Community Climate Challenge. We've been really working on team leader recruitment. Thanks really in part to Anne. The Issaquah Trail Club has gotten very involved, has been doing a big recruitment. The collaborative cities, the 4 cities that are partnering on this, we're bringing on an outreach coordinator that will be working across the city starting next week. So hoping to get a lot more publicity out, engagement. They'll be going out and meeting with different groups around the city to get them involved. There's interest from some students about starting a climate challenge cup. They've been doing this in Spokane. So we're going to start talking with some of the schools about that and getting the youth involved. Performance dashboard, we're continuing to take the feedback we heard from the board a couple meetings ago, make refinements to that. We'll be coming back to you in a couple of months to provide an update. Lead for cities, Billy really has been taking the lead on working on collecting data for that certification program. Not many updates there, except we're just plugging away with collecting data that we'll eventually submit to try and get a certification. Last item just wanted to mention was our budget process is underway. I'm focusing really on looking at the next 2 years and what ICAP implementation it was anticipated through the development of the ICAP. So putting in budget requests around building and home electrification, energy efficiency incentives, looking at implementing the vulnerability assessment, work for the municipal buildings on renewable energy and decarbonization, EV charging, a lot of potential budget items. We're still working on packaging that up, and then it will go to council for discussion. What won't be seen in there, I think, is where a lot of our work might shift in the next year or so to more policy regulations, because we really anticipate that's a lot of the staff time. So that may not be seen in the budget, but that's really where probably a lot of our efforts will shift, and hopefully in collaboration with all of you, we'll be working through those together. So that is all I had for updates. Happy to take questions on that. And then the other thing, just wanted any feedback on the room, any other needs you have. I heard making sure we can get some internet access, because I know folks probably want to pull materials up on their computers, but feel free if you have other feedback, just grab me after them. Any questions on ICAP? Items underway.
Great job with all of that.
Yeah, thank you. Any announcements from any of the board members for the good? Well, thank you, Stacy, for pulling this together, and thank you, everybody, for a successful first in-person meeting. Again, it's nice to see you all.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Billy.